The film opens and we see a young girl writing a letter in the year 2019. She exits the house to see the sunrise, and we learn that she is a vampire. Her entire body burns as soon as the light comes up. Most of humanity has turned into vampires as a result of a disease brought by an infected bat in 2009. We observe vampires going about their normal lives, such as hanging around or going to work. Edward Dalton is a hematologist for the pharmaceutical business Bromley Marks. After passing through security at the building's entrance, Edward walks by the rooms with the robots that produce individuals, which he dislikes, before heading to his lab, where he is working on finding a blood substitute. Following that, he meets with his employer, Charles Bromley, and his lab partner, Christopher Caruso, a commissioner and an army officer. The commissioner informs them of the findings of an experiment they carried out on a death row inmate. He was chosen for research on the consequences of blood deprivation. The lack of blood caused full degeneration of the frontal lobe of the brain, with the first evidence being his ears growing longer. He gradually devolved into a Nosferatu-like beast devoid of logic and emotion. These critters are known as subsides, and they are becoming a nuisance on the streets. Only 5% of the human population remains. If a substitute is not found soon, they will all become lower. His daughter refused to turn and fled. He knows Edward and he both pity people, therefore they must begin testing as soon as possible to rescue the human race. Edward returns to his lab and discusses the situation with Christopher, who points out that the alternative is working on a monkey, indicating that it is time to move beyond animal research. While rubbing his ears, Edward discovers that they are growing longer, opens his camera mirror to examine, and avoids a car coming from the other way. The second car collides with a fence, and Edward is shot in the arm. When he gets home, he eats dinner and begins caring for his plants when he is unexpectedly visited by his brother Frankie Dalton, whom he has not seen in months because he joined the army. Frankie complains about the lack of a birthday celebration, to which Edward responds that he has turned 35 10 times already. But Frankie does not care. He believes they must celebrate, and he has brought a costly bottle of 100% pure human blood to do so. He pours 2 glasses while mocking his brother for drinking pig blood, but Edward declines. Edward grabs the blood container and begins pouring it in the rain, but Frankie grabs it from him and smashes it against the wall before fleeing. But he cannot because a subsidiary is in the way. The thing walks into the kitchen and begins licking the blood off the walls before moving on to the glass on the table. Frankie pulls the blade from the holder, startling the subsidies and pushing him into the wall, causing him to fall on a glass table and lose awareness for a few seconds. The subsider then comes towards Edward, who uses a stool to keep it at bay while crying out his brother's name. Frankie awakens and retrieves the knife. The brothers work together to attack the subsided, but it jumps away and hangs from the ceiling. Frankie can then slice it several times before killing it. Police officers arrive to investigate the case of the subsidies, who have relocated to the suburbs. The security warning wakes Edward asleep, and he discovers Audrey brandishing a crossbow at him. She informs him that they require assistance in locating a vampire substitute and hands him a map. Edward gets distracted by a noise and leaves, only to be confronted by Frankie, who inquires about the woman. Later, as investors withdraw human supplies from Bromley's, Edward meets with his supervisor to request a promise that the substitute will replace human supplies. Bromley agrees, but a small segment of the market demands the actual thing. He adjusts the light protection on the car, drives into the countryside, where Audrey is already waiting for him, and instructs him to approach a large tree. He parks under the shade of that tree and gets out of the car after putting on a cap and sunglasses. He approaches an elderly man, Lionel Elvis Cormack, taking care not to step into the light. This man was formerly a vampire, but he is now human. Audrey, who is being held at gunpoint by Frankie, comes closer, and Edward wants to know how. Edward tries to stop him, but Frankie refuses to listen, and army reinforcements are on their way. Audrey pulls Frankie outside and joins the men. They take Edward's car as the military has already opened fire and wrecked Lionel's vehicle. Lionel takes the wheel so he can see the road by a hole and Edward can hide from the bright light. When they reach a dirty bridge, Lionel drives as fast as he can to cross it safely, but the military truck is too big, and the bridge collapses beneath it, causing the truck to catch fire. The rest of the reserve is left behind with no means to follow. After dark, they stop near a river, and Lionel tells Edward what happened. He had to work on daytime modifications for vehicles and had a place in the first shops in town that did them. The crash catapulted him from the car, and he caught fire before plunging into the river. He emerged from the river, human once again. Lionel and Audrey want Edward to reproduce these situations safely. Back at the office, Bromley is looking at images of his daughter when Frankie arrives to visit him. Bromley congratulates him on reporting what happened and informs him that if Edward returns quickly, no formal charges will be made. Frankie agrees to do anything Bromley asks of him. Meanwhile, Edward and the humans are back in his car, going to their safe house. Edward can't stop looking at Audrey's neck. When she realizes this, as well as his sharp ears, she slashes her hand and puts some blood into a cup. He initially refuses, but Audrey needs to know that the other people are safe around him, so he accepts the cup and drinks it. They arrive in an abandoned vineyard a few hours later, where Edward encounters other humans, including Jarvis, who is leading a group of rescuers in search of additional humans. After entering the mansion, Harry encounters Senator Wes Turner, a vampire politician who advocates for human rights and the discovery of a cure. The staffer informs him that 5% is the maximum she is permitted to serve, but the man will not accept no for an answer. He steals a blood bag and breaks it, splashing everyone around him and sending them into a frenzy. People riot and attack the coffee stand to steal more blood, prompting cops to arrive and electrocute them into submission. When he exits the lab for a break several hours later, most folks move away from him. Audrey approaches him and tells him that they fear him but believe he can help. Edward admits that he did not want to turn, but Frankie betrayed him and did so anyway. Edward observes the fermenting tanks at this point, and after Audrey ensures they are airtight, they step inside to inspect them. The tanks include air extractors that can put out the fire, and Edward decides to use them for their experiment, so they begin working on the appropriate modifications. Later, in the middle of the night, we observe Jarvis' crew driving a convoy of rescued people, including Bromley's daughter Allison, to the vineyard. When a shot causes a flat tire, they are forced to pull over. They emerge with their guns drawn, but the army surrounds them, and all humans are knocked out after a brief shooting exchange. Allison manages to phone the vineyard before passing out, so when Frankie snatches the walkie-talkie from her grasp, they use it to track the call and locate the vineyard. At the vineyard, everyone gathers their belongings and prepares to follow Tuner to his safe house. But because there will be no more chances to repeat the experiment, Lionel and Audrey opt to remain behind and assist Edward. Back at Bromley's, Allison wakes up in her father's office and grabs a blade as he arrives to see her. Allison pushes him away and escapes to the door, but she is knocked unconscious by a soldier as Bromley realizes his daughter has stabbed him. When morning arrives in the vineyard, the trial is ready to begin. Audrey will check the monitors while Lionel remains in the tank with Edward, who has a heart monitor attached to his chest and is wrapped in a wet blanket. Their joy is shattered when the army arrives to raid the location. They avoid detection by hiding in a whiskey barrel. We return to the company, where Frankie goes to Bromley, who is being treated for his wound. Bromley begs Frankie to do everything for him, and Frankie departs the room to visit Allison in her cell. She still does not want to be turned, but Frankie bites her anyhow. After ensuring the safety of their hiding area, the gang returns to the vineyard. While Lionel gets an old automobile of his, Edward wanders outdoors and is amazed by sunlight hitting his skin without burning. Bromley enters the cage and learns she is biting herself, which will change her. Before being hauled away, she confronts her father and blames him for everything. After the military declares martial law so that they can freely combat the soldiers in the streets, we switch to Edward, Audrey, and Lionel arriving at Turner's cabin, only to discover that all the humans have died. Allison is one among them, and seeing her die makes Frankie reconsider his stance. Later that night, Christopher goes home to discover the trio waiting for him. Edward informs him that he has a remedy that is superior to a substitute and requests his assistance in recreating the experiment. Their conversation is cut short by the phone ringing, so Christopher exits the room to take the call. When he takes too long to return, they become suspicious, so Audrey follows him while Edward and Lionel inspect his coat. Christopher had left his phone on a call the entire time, and now everyone in the organization knows where they are. Audrey is knocked out and kidnapped when the army arrives, but Lionel and Edward escape down the subwalk tunnels. They decide to take refuge in an old abandoned garage but are ambushed by a subsider. When Frankie comes, he shoots the beast before realizing his brother has gone human, forcing him to explain that he merely converted him since he did not want to watch him die. He confesses he made a mistake and now wishes to assist, but when Lionel approaches, his thirst overcomes him and he leaps on the human to bite him. Edward grabs him and pushes him away from Lionel. He is about to shoot his brother when he spots something. Moments later, we witness Edward enter the company building willingly, setting off the alarms with his human state. Security apprehends him and transports him to Bromley's office, where Audrey is bleeding on a chair and sipping her blood. Edward betrays Audrey by telling her he regrets everything and wants to be a vampire again. Bromley shows him that they have finally found a replacement for Edward and calls him a coward. Edward brands Bromley a coward as well because he could not turn his daughter. Bromley, enraged, bites Edward, but Edward is unconcerned. In fact, this has been his goal all along. Bromley begins to convert into a human, and when Edward recalls how Frankie also transformed, he reveals that drinking treated vampire blood is the cure. Bromley activates an alert to summon security, and we cut to a swarm of army trucks arriving at the parking lot. When the troops exit their vehicles and reach the lift, the doors open to reveal Bromley chained to a chair, leading the vampires to erupt and feed on him. Meanwhile, Aubrey and Edward, now equipped with weapons he acquired throughout the building, proceed downstairs and are about to escape when additional soldiers come to block their path. When Frankie takes Lionel's car inside, killing all the soldiers to save his brother, the glass doors shatter. But assistance arrives quickly and they are now surrounded. Before committing himself, Frankie orders Edward to go, enabling all the soldiers to jump on him and eat him. Edward does not have time to mourn his death since an officer has kidnapped Audrey and he needs to save her. He follows them to the safety room, where Edward manages to murder 2 vampire guards and assists Audrey in killing the third. Then they see on the surveillance cameras how the soldiers who fed on Frankie turned human, and the other vampire soldiers attacked them as well. There is a feeding massacre, leaving only a few human troops standing. Christopher shoots 2 troops and claims there is no cure. He is killed by an arrow shot by Lionel, who has arrived to assist. Audrey embraces him, while Edward examines his brother's body. The film concludes with the trio leaving in Lionel's car, with Edward declaring that they now have the medicine that can convert everyone back and that it is not too late.